Okay, let's do it.
Your next guest is Kip Shubert. Kip is an educator and coach who is driven to lead and love staff and students to believe and discover that they are the greatest miracle in the world. Having almost 30 years experience in education, Kip is sharing that secret sauce as an educator, coach, author, speaker, and a podcast host of the Secret Sauce with Kip Shubert. Kip recently moved from Oklahoma to the mountains of Colorado, where he now teaches and coaches for the Woodland Park School District. Kip has climbed mountains that once seemed impossible to him. He uses his experiences of being homeless and alcoholic, losing custody of his daughter, and his wife's diagnosis with an incurable blood cancer to share how he used adversity to find his advantage, his secret sauce. His why is to use those powerful stories combined with building real, authentic relationships to reach back over the mountains he has climbed so that he can be that Sherpa to guide and empower others. Kip is the proud father of 4 great kids, 3 amazing grandchildren, and blessed husband to his wife, Cindy. He loves to be outdoors hiking, and especially during college football season, watching football and eating Italian food. He is also an upcoming Road to Awesome author and grateful for each day he gets to share that secret sauce to make a difference in the life of staff and students. Welcome to the podcast, Kip.
Thank you, Dana. I appreciate your grace and persistence and finally getting me on to talk with you. I'm looking forward to the conversation and to share a little bit about secret sauce and see what we can impart on the guys listening to us today.
Yeah, so it is, a pleasure connecting with other Road to Awesome authors and finding out about their story. And, we've been connected for a little while, and we have a couple of things in common, having lived in Oklahoma and now both living in Colorado. But let's start off with that question I start off with everybody. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
That's well, I'll just start with I'm almost 9 years clean and sober. On March 21st this year, it'll be 9 years. And so a little more than that, going back 9-10 years ago, I was an educator and a coach and hanging on by a thread. That the year before I went into rehab, March 21st, 2014, I had missed 47 days of school that year before spring break. And it was a situation where the principal I had at the time was a guy who was a very good friend of mine. And we had started our teaching career together back in 1991 together at Putnam City District in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And he was doing his dead level best for me to keep my job and to help save my professional career. But I was just spiraling out of control. I was drinking 7 days a week, trying to teach, trying to parent the best I could, which was not, which was almost non-existent at that time. And it just got to a point where in my family, most of my family, except for my older kids, lived in Tulsa. And so they were a couple hours from me. And being an addict and alcoholic, I didn't share at all my troubles or what was going on with me with my family. And every time I did show up, I was the life of the party, and they had no idea the extent of my life and how things were going and how bad things were. And I was leaning really heavily on my oldest son, Blake, to come pick me up from bars or to come over and let me, cry or whatever I was doing to him. But one night I had threatened to commit suicide, and I had a gun and it was loaded, and I never could find the guts to pull the trigger. And I think now it's just that I couldn't find those guts because God had something for me to do and more for me. But I called my son over. He had to see me in that situation. And it's just it broke him. That situation broke him. And he called my parents and just said, listen, I'm not his mom and dad. Come get him. And so I had some of my siblings showed up the next day, picked me up and took me to Tulsa. And a week later, I went into Valley Hope rehab facility in Cushing, Oklahoma. And again, I went into rehab thinking that I would come out knowing how to drink responsibly and party like a good guy, right? And so I was about a week into rehab and still didn't think I had an issue. But when I went into rehab, I was homeless, obviously an addict and an alcoholic, and still not thinking I had a problem. And my counselor calls me in about a week into rehab, and she asked me to sit down, and I could immediately tell on her face that something was terribly wrong. And what I thought was maybe one of my kids had died or my parents had died. I mean, it was that serious. And she said, "Kip, sit down, I need to tell you something." And that is when I learned that I had lost all parental rights and custody of my little girl, Camden, who was 5 years old at the time. And that was my rock bottom moment. My reaction to it was I got very angry. And the place that I was in was a place that you could leave at any time. You weren't forced to stay. And so I was going to go grab my stuff and I was going to go commit suicide and kill myself. I was done. And as I was walking back to my room to get my stuff together, I walked by the chapel they had there. And for whatever reason, I felt compelled to go in. And I went in and I sat down on the front row of the chapel there, and I just stared at the cross forever. And I just began to cry, and and how my life has gotten to that point, and how it had unraveled so far to where I was homeless, an alcoholic in rehab. That finally hit me. I had lost custody of my kid. My other three were adults already, so I had nothing left except my teaching certificate and my job at Yukon Middle School in Yukon, Oklahoma. And I looked up at that cross and I uttered one word, and the only thing I could utter out of my mouth was the word help. That's it. And I don't know. It was a spiritual moment for me, but I can't really describe it other than there was just a warm sensation that just kind of picked me up, and I stood up. And whether it was God or whatever, I just heard a voice saying, "You got work to do. It's not about you anymore." And so it's one of the things I talk about when I go into schools, as far as being able to rediscover that fire and purpose. And what we do as educators is it's not about us. And my whole life to that point had been all about me. Why wasn't I getting the things that I was due, whether it was in my broken marriage that I'd gotten divorced, and that's kind of what sent me over the edge with the alcohol and the drinking. But why hadn't my life turned out like everybody else's, and all the other people I taught with, and all these people that I admired? And I felt so sorry for myself, and it was all about me. And it just flipped, like a switch. That I had work to do. Then the first work was to get my daughter back in my life. And it wasn't easy getting sober. It wasn't easy leaving a rehab facility and going back to a place where you had no place to stay. I had no car. And they gave me a week to kind of get my feet, find a place to stay, and couch surf to get back to work and teaching school. And I did all that, but I think the thing that was the catalyst for me, and I think for most people that experience adversity that are in the trenches, is that they somehow lose that sense of purpose. And for me, my purpose was all about Kip getting teacher of the year again, or getting coach of the year, or getting all these things that I'd gotten before as a professional soccer player, getting all those accolades. And it was always about what I could get and not what I could give. And when that switched for me, and it was about what I could give back, that made all the difference. For me, in coming out of that trench. And again, like you mentioned in the bio, it wasn't an automatic. My life didn't change and was just great. All of a sudden, it was a really hard climb, a huge mountain, where many days I didn't think that I would be able to do it. It took me 3.5 years to to get my daughter back into my life. And she's now almost 16, getting ready to drive, and your typical teenage girl. I just spent the weekend with her this past weekend in Oklahoma City. And, I think that, again, that played a part in that was another trench I climbed out of, but that time prepared me to be the father that she needed. It prepared me with discipline and perseverance. It's made me a much better teacher, an educator, a coach, and even a speaker when I go in to do those kind of things in the speaking space. And, that was just something that was very difficult. But the one thing you mentioned at the end was my wife's cancer. And, when life finally started, it took about 5 years probably, when we were getting married, and I had met Cindy, and I'd gotten financially kind of back on my feet. I had something to drive. I had a place to live. I had a teaching career in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was going really well. I just won Teacher of the Year my first year in TPS, at Tulsa Public Schools, and life was great. And Cindy is one who always goes and gets physicals and yearly checkups and all that. And her blood proteins were off, and we were getting ready to go on vacation. And the doctor didn't think that much of it. Said, go on vacation. We'll test you in a month. It's probably something in your diet, whatever. And then when we go back the next month and she goes in for her test again, the blood proteins are increasingly higher than what they were the month before. And he gives us a number to call. And so Cindy calls it, and on the other end of the phone, they answer St. Francis Oncology Department. And she had no idea. I had no idea. And my first reaction was, what about me? What about Kip? Here I am. I found this woman. We're getting married. My life is great. It's going to fall apart. And then, I had to go to the bathroom actually and dry my eyes. And when I came back into the kitchen, she was standing there, and she looked at me and she said, I will live and I will not die. And, that kind of just reaffirmed all the lessons that I had learned in my years of recovery before. And, with her beside me, it's just one of those things that we've done every day since then, is that we live big. It's one of the reasons we moved here to Colorado. And we'll make the most of our life, and she will not die, and we'll just make a difference. And I think that's probably the thing that's my passion right now, is just creating an impact where you are and with what you do, because that's why we're here. And so there's just been it's been a difficult 8 3/4 or almost 9 years of a journey out of that trench of alcoholism. But it's one that has put me in the place that I am today, and has taught me so many things about my passion, my why, my purpose, and really the impact of doing what we do as educators, and how important it is, and to value every single day, and to know that I get to. I don't have to. I think that's something that's very important, in remembering gratitude is one of my things that I do in my journal every morning, still to this day, that I learned in rehab, that is so important, that when I know when I focus on the good and seeing the good and staying above that line, all the noise around education and being a teacher and a coach and those kind of things just doesn't have the effect on me that it would have, before, or maybe on other people. So that was probably my biggest trench, and how I kind of climbed out of that.
Yeah, and being there for your wife when she got that diagnosis and going through her treatment, you wouldn't have been able to be that person to be there for her in the past. The old you that was only focused on herself, and like you said, it took hitting rock bottom, losing your daughter, right, and to realize that you had the problem and needed to work through that, right? So
I really think that all those recovery slangs, rock bottom and one day at a time, and I went to AA for a while. I mean, I always thought that was for other people. That was for those people.
Yeah.
The ones you see on the street corner holding the sign. And I learned that, I think we're all recovering from something. But addiction and those kind of things, it could be a lot of different things. It doesn't discriminate. It hits everybody. And it's just one of those deals where I think the beauty of what I went through is that I'm able to use those things now, not just to help someone who's going through a recovery from drugs or alcohol, but whatever you're recovering from, and as teachers and educators and coaches, it's there's a lot to recover the last couple of years in education, and it's been a tough road. So I'm grateful for that journey and for those lessons, and to be able to share them now in my story and what I call the secret sauce.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think those hard times in your past have only made you stronger, like you said, prepared
Right.
to, give these talks, prepared to write your book and speak to others and impact youth. Let's talk a little bit about your move from Oklahoma to Colorado. So, I've also worked in Tulsa Public Schools during my student teaching. And, you said you worked in Sapulpa as well. Is that correct?
Right.
So I'm familiar with both of those places. And, now you live in Woodland Park, which is right above Colorado Springs. So talk about kind of the shift from working in a larger urban school district like TPS to where you are currently, and then a little bit about your day-to-day, what you teach and coach.
Okay. And Tulsa, as you know, Tulsa Public Schools is a huge urban district. And the biggest difference between TPS and even Sapulpa and Woodland Park really is the diversity. My second year in Tulsa Rogers, I had several kids in the same class who did not speak any English whatsoever. And I spoke very little Spanish. And so that was the very first time that I had ever experienced anything like that at all. And yeah, it was extremely difficult trying to teach those students who couldn't understand me and I couldn't understand them. And Google Translate became our best friend, and almost like playing charades with a lot of things. It was, but just to, I mean, to be able to go through that and to see the good and see the joy in it, it was such a blessing to me. Even when I could see that they actually got something I was trying to teach them. And and then just have them just buy into the things that we were doing in the classroom, and then to hear their stories. And that, I think there's one of the things I talk about in my classes now, Woodland Park, is that absence of diversity. And those kids that I have now, it's not their fault, and they can't, they don't have a choice in how they're brought up or where they're brought up or who their parents are or where they live. And and kids are so much more open-minded and resilient today than they were when I was in middle school, obviously. But they don't have that experience that the kids in the larger cities, or even down in the Colorado Springs, where it's much more diverse. They just don't have those experiences. And so, I wish that they did, because they could see, you can try through social studies, and social studies is what I teach in Woodland Park, 6th grade Western Hemisphere geography. So you can try to talk about and do things and show them other cultures and other ways of living and the things like that and how they do it currently. So maybe it's more relevant to them. But until they actually experience it firsthand, it's not the same. And so I wish they had that here. They don't, but that's the biggest difference. And us moving here was really a COVID situation. We were going to retire, and we always had vacationed up around Woodland Park area. But we were going to, once we retired, we were going to move up here. And when COVID hit, it was just like, with the things, with her cancer and with everything else, it was like, let's live big. Let's make every day count. And so we put the house up, but actually before we put the house up for sale, it sold. And then course, moving here and the markets from Oklahoma to Colorado were drastically different. So trying to actually trying to find a house here was difficult, and that was another big challenge and kind of a trench. But you know, it's just been amazing being here. We love the place, but I do miss that diversity and that the differences that you have in those urban schools, because I actually learned a lot, because the schools that I came from before that were predominantly white, and so a lot of things I experienced and learned in TPS, the kids were teaching me just as much as if as I was teaching them. And I'm still in contact with a lot of those kids still today, and love to hear that they're doing well and stuff like that. But I do miss that diversity and that the bigness. But I will say too, coming to a smaller district like Woodland Park, it's so much easier to feel a part of the entire district, because everybody knows everybody, and all the upper admin, and you can make those connections and relationships with a lot more people because it's a smaller place. So you get to know a lot more people in all the different positions in the district that you probably wouldn't in a place like TPS, because you just don't have access to the superintendent or the upper admin people or things like that.
Yeah, I've worked in small districts and large ones, and I get what you're saying. Like the easier access to the people in charge, right? When you're in a smaller district, and you kind of are one of tens of thousands for the larger districts. So what do you coach? You also have been a coach, or are you still coaching the same thing you coached back in Oklahoma?
Yeah, I coach soccer. I coached the boys soccer team here in Woodland Park. I've coached longer than I've taught. I started coaching before I actually got out of college. But I've coached club and high school in the Oklahoma City and Tulsa areas. I had retired from coaching. I can't remember 2007 or 8. I was Oklahoma West Side Coach of the Year at Putnam City High School, and it was really cutting into my drinking time, and so I retired from coaching. I quit so I could drink more, really. And I think I'm saying 2015, 16. Can't remember what year it was, but a friend of mine who he had played against me as a player when I was coaching in Oklahoma City, and he went to play D1 ball. Great little soccer player, and became a really good friend of mine through my recovery. And he's like, "Hey, I heard the job at Sapulpa soccer's open," and I was just like, AJ, why would I want to go there? They haven't won. They never win. They've been the bottom of 6A soccer since I can remember. And he goes, "Hey, if you apply and get the job, I'll be your assistant. I think it's a good thing for you." And I'm like, "You need to get back in. It's what you do." And so I reluctantly applied for it, but glad I did. The AD there at the time was Jason Parker. He's a former Tulsa University basketball player, and we became really good friends. And that connection was really great for me to have. But when they first called me back about the job, they asked me to be the assistant first, and I had never been an assistant anywhere in my life. And I just told Jason, I'm like, I'm not interested. And he called back a couple of days later and said, "We want to offer you the head coach job." And so I said, "Let me talk to my wife." And I asked Cindy the same thing. I'm like, why would I haven't been in soccer, and it's been about 7 or 8 years, and I think it's passed me by. I was kind of done with it. And plus these guys have lost, they only won 10 games in like the last decade. They're terrible. Why would I want to do that? And she just looked at me and said, if you're not uncomfortable, you can't grow. And I was like, dang it, and of course your wife's always right. And so I just was like, okay, we'll give it a shot. And I'm glad I did, because the first year I was coaching there, we won 10 games. We were 10-5. It's the best records the pulpit had in probably 2 decades. And we turned the program around, but it was an opportunity for me to really put into practice all those things that I had learned through my recovery and coming out of that trench, right? It was what I was beginning to call my secret sauce that I didn't even know at the time. It allowed me to really get in and give and not worry about getting, because it wasn't about me. And it allowed me to really practice those things that I now call the secret sauce, and that I've developed through that time, especially in Sepulpa and coaching those boys, to really make me the man I am, a better father, a better husband, better teacher, coach, and give me a platform to share those things and how we can use our story to create an impact for others.
Yeah, and that got you back into coaching as well, right? And like you said, it was a challenge and turning around the program, but like that helped you be a better coach in your current position. And so you mentioned the secret sauce a lot, and I wanted to touch a little bit on the book that you're currently, I think you said in the queue to have
Yeah.
published with Road to Awesome. So just touch a little bit on what people can expect when the book is available, kind of what they would expect to get from reading it, and like how people might be able to discover their secret sauce, if that's something that you talk about as well.
Yeah. Well, right now the working title is, part of it's called To Hell and Back.
Okay.
And I don't know with with Darren Peppard and Road to Awesome and what will come of that when we get through. It may change a little bit, but I really just, in the book, I share the story more in depth than what I've shared here really on the podcast with the time that we have. But I go into depth about my alcoholism and recovery. But I break down into the chapters the different things like perseverance and discipline and selflessness, forgiveness, um, grace, um, understanding the we before me mindset, and things like that I learned through my experiences, really through my early childhood and early adulthood, and then my recovery and things like that from drinking, and then how I use those in coaching and teaching today. Um, and then I also, part of we all have that secret sauce, and it's really all it is sharing our story and understanding what that story is. And we all have different things. I mean, you have your story and I have mine, and there's things that you have learned through yours that I haven't. And so, we all have those unique, different ingredients to the secret sauce that we've learned through those adversities that become our advantage, or the struggles that become our strength. And it's just understanding how to uncover, it's kind of peeling back the layers of the onion, kind of how to uncover those, and to really get in touch with who you are, what your passions are, what your natural gifts and abilities are, and how you can use that through your story to impact others where you are. And so, it's like for me, I thought forever teaching and coaching was about how high I could climb the ladder, and what awards and things I could win. And I still had a natural gift and ability to connect with kids. I mean, relationships are my thing. It's just what I do. And I didn't really even realize it at the time. But I've got kids that will message me today, and where I still talk to, that that didn't really know the extent of what was going on with me. They knew that I smelled like alcohol half the time when I walked into the classroom. But, even then, how I helped, save their life, or, alter the trajectory of what they're doing into a successful way. Now with their lives, they haven't forgotten the lessons that we talked about in the classroom. And really, back then, I was just sharing everything I was struggling with and my demons, and kind of portraying that as somebody else, and they related to that, and it's just, they had no idea that they were keeping me alive, those kids.
Yeah.
I got up in the morning sometimes, I missed 47 days of work that last year, but I missed a lot of days every year because I was, on benders or whatever. But those kids and those connections with those kids, those relationships, kept me from doing the things that, I thought about in those dark hours by myself, and they just kept me alive, and I'm so grateful for them. And so again, the book is just, it's my story and the things that I've learned through the hardships that I've gone through. Really, it's my adversities and how I use them now as my advantages, and that is my secret sauce. And how relationships drive what we do, and we're in the people business, and how relationships and culture, whether you're in the classroom, whether you're in admin, whether you're in an athletic position as a coach, those things drive what we do. And we have such a powerful job to create an impact on people, and change their lives. And it's just trying to uncover that, and to get people to dig deeper into who they are, to find that, because they're not just a teacher, they're not just a coach. There's so much more than that, to the kids we teach, to the people we serve, to the athletes we coach. And so, I
Yeah.
hope that, and from what I understand, I think it should be out sometime around the end of May.
Okay.
So it'll be, tail and back, probably something that's how I found my secret sauce. I'm sure that we'll work it out. Pep and I will work that out, but it should be out into May sometime, and it's been a long time coming, so I'm really excited to do that. And I spent 3 or 4 years trying to get it started.
Yeah.
And it was all recovery. It was all that darkness, that part of my story. And I'd get about 3 or 4 chapters in and scrap it because it was so heavy. And it was just like, that's not who I am anymore. It's not. And, and through hooking up with Darren and Brandon Beck as coaches, they really got me to see, relationships and teaching and coaching was what I did. How can I use that? All those things that I knew I was developing in myself, that secret sauce that was there. How can we now get that out and share that with people? And so,
yeah. Well, I'm glad that you connected with them. It's exciting to have that kind of on that horizon. To hear your story, to know about what you have to share as well through your podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. So we've had a great conversation around what you do, kind of your move to Colorado, a little bit about your trench story. Out of everything we talked about on the podcast today, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I want them to remember, and if you're listening to this, whether you're in education or not, or whatever role that you have in education, that you're there to create an impact. I mean, from the school bus driver to the head admin person or the superintendent. As educators, I believe that we are in the greatest profession in the world, and we have such an ability and power to change the trajectory of people's lives. And it's all about reconnecting to your purpose, recalibrating your mindset, and then reliving your story in every single thing that you do. It's just, people ask me, do you share your recovery stuff with your 6th graders? Well, absolutely not. I don't share some of the things I even shared here on this podcast in the classroom with middle school kids. It's not appropriate, but I can share the lessons that I learned through that, and I can kind of temper down the stories a little bit to where they don't really know what I'm saying necessarily, but I can still relay those things. And there's other stories that I've learned through my time, and other stories that I experienced, especially after I've gotten out of recovery and back into teaching and coaching and everything, that I can relay to those kids, that really just about not giving up and loving people and being kind. And one of the things I say to them all the time is, I love you, cupcakes. I got this big poster on my wall. I got a coffee mug at Valentine's Day from a girl. Her mom put "I love you" cupcakes on it. It was cool. But it's just to share that with them, and then share that with the people around me. In our school, in our district. As a coach, I can share more of those stories because they're of an older age. And it just relates so much to what, you know, kids are going to go through and what they see. And when they see, I think the thing that, you know, creating that impact, and like I said, reconnecting with your purpose, recalibrating your mindset, reliving your story. If kids, you know, that common saying that they don't know how, they won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. But if you can make yourself authentic and real,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what you teach. The kids are going
Yeah.
to learn it because they're gonna love you. They just want somebody that real in front of them. And so I don't, when I share my stories, if I cry in front of them, I cry, and I don't, you know, I'm just vulnerable and sometimes raw. And it's just, I think as teachers and educators, the more vulnerable and raw we can be with our stories in front of the people that we serve, the further you're going to push them to their successes that they're going to have in their life. Because again, they're going to remember what you told them and how you made them feel. They're not going to remember that content. And so it's just again about, you know, make an impact where you are, share your story, be raw, be vulnerable, find that secret sauce because you have it, and begin to share it with those people around you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's so important to remember. Where can people connect with you and find you online?
On Facebook, if you look for the secret sauce with Kip Shubert, or just Kip Shubert on Facebook, that's probably the best way. It's one I use most often. Instagram is secret sauce at secret sauce edu. That is the Instagram and Twitter. LinkedIn, same. My podcast is on Podbean, but it's also on all the other major podcast. What do you call those things? Podcast apps, I guess.
Yeah.
the
Distribution sites.
There you go. The techie stuff that's not my secret sauce. The tech stuff. But yeah, just I would look for me on Facebook. That's what I use the most. You can check out my website at kipshubert.com. If anybody's listening and would like to talk about how I can work with them and bring them the secret sauce to their school and district, they can get in touch with me on there and fill out a form to for me to get back with them on.
Great, great. Well, it's been a pleasure finally connecting with you, having you on the Out of the Trenches podcast. You know, I hope people get a lot out of hearing your story and are able to connect with you, like you said, if they'd like to have you come out and speak. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you again, Dana. I appreciate it.